Welcome to the podcast. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Clem, and this is Turns Out We're Gay. This is a good episode today.
This is a really good episode. We teased it on the last episode. I think we've been teasing this since we actually started the podcast. Yeah. And I say that like it's been forever. It's only been 2 episodes.
Yeah,
but
feels like forever for us.
I'm excited. This is a naughty episode. Do you want to do a disclaimer?
I think this is just a simple disclaimer. 18 plus, and mum and dad maybe need to
mum, dad, family,
skip right over it.
Close friends. If you don't want to know, don't listen. If you do listen, don't message me later. We warned you. But at the same time, I think the topic needs to be had.
So family, probably skip through it.
Skip right through. But here we are talking about the bees and the bees. We did the research. It's actually the bees and the bees.
We did. There was a definition. It was too hard for me to remember. So I just said, look, say we've done the research. It was the first thing that popped up on Google. It's not our fight if you have an issue with it. But according to Google, it's the bees and the bees.
You can Google it, basically.
And I have a bee tattoo, so
cute.
I think it's a sign.
Can I just add that you are looking very sexy today?
Thank you. You always look sexy.
You always look sexy, but this shirt in particular is very sexy.
Why is that?
It just brings back some memories. Funny we're talking about the bees and the bees, but it's actually the shirt you first wore when we were having some fun.
For the first time.
For the very first time.
Correct.
So it brings back some very good memories.
You're getting distracted.
I am panicking.
We need to stick to the plan we've got for this podcast.
It's hard when you're wearing this.
Let's jump straight into it.
Okay, perfect.
Growing up. We're going to start from the start and we're going to work our way through. So growing up, did you have any same-sex intimacy, kisses, whatever? Run us through youth, Sarah.
I did, actually. And we were talking about this recently. And I don't think I've ever actually admitted it. So it's a podcast first.
There you go. Exclusive.
Sorry, mum and dad, but I used to drink, like, at a young age. Naughty girl.
That is horrendous.
I know. So on a little, 2 drinks of UDLs or something silly like that.
Lit.
I know. I was lit. And whenever I was a little bit litty-titty, I would kiss a girl, most likely a close friend or just a girl. And I used to think like, oh, it's just the cool thing, whatever. You might be doing it for the boys, all that nonsense. But
the boys.
It turns out I'm gay.
It does turn out that you're gay.
It turns out I'm gay. So I used to have some little kisses here and there. Look, friends, if you're hearing this and I kissed you, you probably enjoyed it as well. So anyway, we'll move on from that. But the only like youthful experience that I had that was a little bit more than that was in high school. And this is something that no one would probably know, but I did have a bit of a same-sex experience with a friend from school. And, like, when I say from school, I mean, like, year 11, 12. Like, we were a bit older. And, yeah, it was a bit more than a kiss.
Do go on.
I don't know how far. We're putting it out on the table. Okay, so I would say it was a bit more of probably the first time I touched boobs.
Wow.
Yeah. And I loved it. I know. And a little bit more.
Okay.
But not too much. We were still pretty young. So, like, nothing crazy. But, at the time, it was exciting. And, yeah, it was the first pair of boobs that I touched. And that was probably when I was about 17.
Wow.
So, naughty noodle. But after that, there wasn't, I wouldn't say after high school, there really wasn't anything else. Having a cheeky little kiss wasn't on the table until later in life. But definitely had my high school fun.
Naughty.
It turns out I'm gay. What about you in your youth?
I wasn't as naughty as you. Actually, probably surprising, shock horror to a lot of people. I think in general I probably haven't been as naughty as you, but
That's questionable.
Oh,
Especially in the last year. I think
It's probably not even been my worst year, to be fair.
Oh, goodness me. Wow. Okay. You're a naughty noodle. But anyway, back to
can
your
be.
youth. You can be. You're
I
not
can be.
anymore. Well,
I can
you
also not
are.
be.
You know, you're not out and about anymore, which is
No,
great. So,
no.
anyway, back to youth Clem.
Youth Clem. So I didn't do any of the whole kissing for the boys thing. I've been tomboy my whole life. I've definitely had a lot more friends that were guys. I found it easier to connect with them, probably because I was struggling with the whole same-sex thing in general. But
Yeah.
I definitely had a lot more guy friends, and I just don't think I was the right person to do the whole kissing a girl gets them excited type thing. But no, I never really did that. I didn't drink till about 17 anyway, so I did a lot of things later on. I was a little bit of a goody two-shoes, but I definitely did the odd little kiss where you do the whole, we need to know how to kiss when we kiss a boy.
Cute.
So I remember we had one sleepover, there was a couple of us there, and we all kissed each other a few times to practice.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
We never spoke of that again, ever. It never got breathed again. And that started a big thing of shame for me because it was like this thing that was like, no one tell a soul. And you know how like in high school you'll have a secret or whatever and it will wheedle its way out? No one knew. This never got out.
Yeah.
And I was in a small school, so the classes, I think I had about 12 to 15 girls by the end of the year in year 12. This was probably in year 8 or so.
Yeah, right.
But it never got out. No one ever knew about it. So I just felt immense shame about it. And I just thought, and like I said in previous episodes, there was just not a lot of positivity towards the queer community when I was growing up. Not from my family or anything like that, but just in general society and my school and things like that. It was definitely had a negative connotation. So that was my only sort of growing up experience in that sense. And it's actually quite funny because I think out of about 12 girls, off the top of my head, I can think of about 4 that are now completely gay, if
Isn't
not,
that interesting?
you know, in the queer community in some way or another. But yeah, there's a few of us. And we don't talk now, but it does make me laugh.
I think we grew up at a similar time. I know we're only a couple of years apart. Don't even
You're pretty old. You are pretty old. You are a cougar.
Moving on. You just like older women. But we were sort of around the same age when we were going to school and things. And I definitely experienced the same thing. Even though I was a bit, you know, cheekier than you in high school, I also had immense shame. And a lot of the little kiss here and there usually would happen on a night out or, you know, with an excuse.
Yeah.
Always with an excuse. It was never because that's actually what I wanted. And at the time I probably didn't know that that's actually what I wanted, but it always came with an excuse. So I think the shame was a big issue for a long time. And it's interesting because I wonder now what it's like to be at school.
Yeah. Well, I think it's come a long way. I definitely still think that there's still some negative connotation to it for a lot of people, but that's the whole thing about doing these sorts of things is we're going to try and make it more accessible and more common and more normalised. I think that's the biggest thing for us. But I will actually, before we move on from that growing up stage, I do want to stress that there was in no way any romantic feelings towards any of those girls that I did kiss. And I think that's something that people often struggle with when you come out is like your girlfriends type thing.
Yes.
All suddenly think that you're in love with them.
Oh my God.
And it is so far from the truth. It just honestly, I can tell you right now, disclaimer, any girl I kissed in high school, zero attraction.
Yes.
Absolutely zero.
Same. Maybe not my extra situation.
Your special friend.
My special friend. But any girls that I kissed, not attracted to. And just because we're gay doesn't mean we're attracted to every single female.
No, and I think that's something that we also need to touch on. I don't even know why we're touching on it. It's probably a different episode that it comes up with. But I like to say this in a lot of senses. Whenever there's something in this queer realm and people trying to wrap their heads around some concept, think of it in a reverse situation. Because you are straight, are you attracted to every single man you see? No.
No. Well, I know this is a topic that we're not going to touch on today, and I think it might be coming up in another episode, but if not, we'll make it. But I actually struggled with intimacy, as in like attraction and intimacy with women when I first came out. I'm not attracted to many women, but I'm gay. So
You are.
I'm very gay. But I'm not, and I find it really hard to be like, if a girl just walks up to me, I'm not instantly attracted to them. And it takes a lot for me to be attracted, or I'm either instantly attracted, like with you. It was very, very quick. But I'm not. So if you think that I am, I can almost assure you that I'm not. And that's a topic for another time. But yeah, you raise a really interesting point.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because I think there's probably people that maybe sneakily listen to this that always wondered, now that I am out, if that was one of those things. It's not.
It's not.
It absolutely was not a factor, and it didn't even cross my mind.
And now you know. So you grew up, we were talking about you got into a relationship you were 18 when you got with your ex-partner. And then how old were you when you had your first experience?
I believe I was 27 when we split, 26, 27. So that's how old I was. I had only been with him. That was my only sexual experience and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I wasn't very experienced in any sense of the matter. I did do a couple of things here and there growing up before 18 and stuff like that, but still not anything that rowdy. So in general, I wasn't that experienced. So for me, it wasn't only just, crossing the bridge of being with a woman for the first time. It was actually just in general being with someone for the first time.
Yeah.
Other than my one partner that I'd had.
Yeah.
So that was a really big adjustment for me. I also touched in one of the previous episodes on how that was one of the darkest times of my life.
Yeah.
And I had to make that decision without any experience in that sense with another woman. So for me, the first time was extremely nerve-wracking because I was going, I've just walked away from this lovely human being and a lovely life that we had worked towards and things like that. What if I don't even like it?
Yeah.
What if I think this is how I am and then it happens and it's just not right?
Yeah.
Which was interesting for me because my first experience was with a lovely woman who I've said this to you before, I wouldn't be attracted to now. I didn't know what my type was. I didn't know what I was attracted to and whatnot. So I connected with someone on a dating app and we talked and they were really sweet. And I sort of said, I don't think I explicitly said it was my first time with a woman, but I said that I wasn't experienced and things like that. And they were extremely patient with me. They were very respectful of where I was and taking things at my pace and whatnot, which ended up being a lot faster than I think they thought it was because I was so nervous I just wanted to get it out of the way. But yeah, so my experience was interesting because although it wasn't someone that I was absolutely obsessed with or infatuated with or anything like that, it was still a very positive experience for me in the sense that it wasn't someone that I was dying to sleep with again and again and whatever, but I still kind of confirmed, I'm comfortable doing this sort of stuff. Obviously, to an extent, you're obviously uncomfortable when it's someone new and this and that, but it felt right to be with a woman.
Yeah.
So my first experience was, with someone that was very patient and very kind, and I'm very grateful and I always will be. I still, keep up to date with their life and whatnot, and we didn't ever date properly or anything like that, so we didn't have a messy end or anything like that. It's really nice to have that, I think, sort of see them with their partner and where they're going in life and whatnot, and they just were a really nice part of my story for me.
Yeah.
And then I kind of made up for lost time a little bit.
You sure did. You sure did. But I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
Well, I had to because I literally never had that time.
No.
Experimenting or
exactly
figuring out who I was. When I was 27, I turned 18 again.
Yeah.
And I was a kid in a candy shop. I'd never experienced dating as an adult, and I never experienced going out and, one night stands and things like that. These were foreign concepts to me. So it was literally like I had started my life over again.
Yeah.
And it was exciting. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
It had plenty of ups and downs, but it was exciting. And for me, it was very natural.
Yeah. Some would say you were born to be gay.
I genuinely believe I was born to be gay. I didn't struggle in that area, let's just say.
You don't. You definitely
I
don't.
I didn't know how to do it, but I knew.
You know.
My body somehow knew.
Oh, you know. You know what you're doing. I think I told you before we met that you were my first one-on-one, alone, no one else involved situation.
Yeah, because you had quite a different first experience.
Totally different. And I do have to be a little bit careful about how much detail I can go into because I was in more of a polyamorous situation. So I want to be respectful of other people that were involved. But all of my exploring experiences were in that lifestyle. They were in a polyamorous situation. And, you know, I met some really lovely people along the way and some that I'm still connected with. And similar to you, where I've stayed connected with their life, you know, and who they're with and whatnot. But for me, my first experience was in a polyamorous situation. And I have regrets with that because I think at the time it felt right. I was a bit confused about whether or not I was just, which this is going to sound ridiculous now, but whether or not I was just like sexually attracted to women, but not emotionally. And I really struggled with that. And at one point I actually thought, I don't know if I can emotionally be with a woman. And so I was almost questioning whether or not I was actually gay, like altogether, which is silly because
It turns out
I'm gay. I'm very gay. And that probably comes into more of an attraction conversation later. But my first time with a woman like that, and not my little secret friend from high school, and anyone from my high school, don't try and figure it out, but because you'll never know.
I so would if I was them. I would be going detective mode.
Good luck.
As I say, get the quiz onto it. We will find out in a heartbeat.
Yeah. But yeah, when I came out, I came out to my ex-husband, who was, regardless of our relationship, if you put that aside, with this particular thing, he was very supportive. And at the time that I came out, I was still very much in love with him, very similar to you, where I was still very much in love with him, but I had this whole side to me that I wanted to explore, and I was very, very confused, and he allowed me to do that, but ultimately that ended in a polyamorous situation. So my first time, I'm trying to be careful here, but my first time with a woman was with my ex-husband in the room. And there is definitely a space for polyamory, and it taught me a lot, but I do wish that I explored myself alone before even considering polyamory, because I wouldn't consider it now. It's not even an option. It's Clementine, it's not an option. I just want to be very clear.
She says this every time. We talk about absolutely everything. We break down every piece of our history we know about ex-partners and blah, 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 blah. We have no limits to what we know about each other. Every time this word comes up, she looks me dead in the eye and she says, this is not an option. As people might have picked up over these episodes, I can be a little bit cheeky.
Yeah.
So as I sort of picked up on this vibe you have, the vibe you have against this idea now, I like to just kind of poke the bear a little bit, and I'll often sometimes just sort of say, well, if I was to come up to you and say, you know, open relationship, blah, blah, blah.
No.
And it is so funny. It is so satisfying watching your face, because you try so hard to be open and like not shut it down straight away. But as you can all probably see, I'll zoom in on all the angles. She's not here for it.
It's not an option. And I think this is definitely a topic for later. I'm here to explore the polyamory experience that I had without talking about the people involved.
Absolutely.
So here for that. And I can talk about why there is a space for polyamory and why we are never doing it. Love you.
I love you too.
Well, actually, not we are never doing it. You're always allowed to change and evolve as a person. It's not something that's ever going to be on the tables for me ever again. But we can talk about that on another episode. But that was my first experience. So basically, it's not happening because we're staying together forever and ever. But that was my first experience. And I knew straight away that I loved women in my first experience. I remember it being so exciting. Things that I remembered in my first experience was like how soft women's skin are.
And slow.
It's not the same. It's so different. You've got to be so much more gentle. I just remember during it just being like, am I being too rough? Like, I don't know, because I'm not used to it. And it's like, it was scary, but also really exciting. And then, yeah, with a lot of my experiences, my first experiences were in, with multiple people involved. And that is so different to my first experience alone with a woman.
Which was?
Which was with you.
How was that?
Are we going to go into this? I feel like we're going to into this. Our first time was just mind-blowing. And I don't mean that in the way of like, it was good sex. It was good. We can't deny that it was good sex. We have a very healthy sex life.
There's no issues in that department.
Sorry, mum and dad, but we do. And like our first time and my first time alone, just completely from start to finish. And I don't just mean that sex. I mean like getting to know a woman on my own and building on that and building friendship and building relationship and then it getting into an intimate relationship was just such a different experience for me. And it was crazy. Like I think I laid there for a while. Just was like, oh my God. It was just, yeah, I can't even put words on it.
I have that effect on people.
You do. Yeah, you have that effect on me.
I'm being silly.
Okay.
Our first time and all the times after that have been extremely intimate and so emotional.
So emotional. And that's probably the difference to my first times previously. There was no emotion. It was very much such a different dynamic. There's multiple people you've got to worry about and there's, you're trying not to have emotions in it because I was technically in a relationship. So, it was weird. It was different. It was so different for me. The best kind of different.
Perfect.
Yeah. And we'll just sit on that for a minute. I was just remembering.
Yeah, I think both of our brains then were just, how like there's that thing where the math calculations go, like we were just off in another land.
I was just off daydreaming. But so you were really my first experience.
Lucky you.
Lucky you. Clementine Lockhart.
Lucky me.
Lucky you.
Very fair. Lucky me.
You don't want to go into details?
Oh, of the outfit?
Yeah.
Lucky me is all we're going to say on that one. Lucky
Perfect.
me.
And moving on.
Lucky me. And now I'm going to need a minute to just process my thoughts.
Perfect. So did it come naturally to you?
What's that?
Just being with a woman, going down. Actually, this is a question that comes up a lot to the first timers coming out and they say, I've never gone down on a woman before. And whether you cut this into the podcast or not, I'm leaving it up to you. But it is a question that comes up a lot about first time. That's the thing that they're worried about, which is interesting because it's not the only thing that we do.
No.
But is that what you were worried about going into it? Did that come naturally to you?
I think everything worried me, to be honest. Like I said, I'd kissed someone on the mouth. That's it. So there wasn't anything that didn't terrify me about it. It was different for sure. Like I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my God, it was incredible and this and this and this. It was definitely different.
Yeah.
And even though I thoroughly enjoyed the experience, even though I wasn't in love with the person or overly attracted to them or whatnot, I had a nice safe environment and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was different.
Yeah.
And it does take a little bit of adapting. It's a completely different sensation.
It's totally different.
But I love it.
Yeah.
And I got over the difference very quickly and I think fell quite naturally into it all.
Yeah.
How about you?
Same. No, same. It is different. It is terrifying. Like I said before, like women are just different. You're thinking about so much more and
I think there's a lot more attention to detail.
a lot more attention to detail. But also because we are women, we know it's not just about the action of doing that. There's so much more that goes into it. And I think that was the difference for me, is I'm consciously thinking about that. All the extra things that you got to do that goes into that. So yeah, it's a different sensation. I was terrified, and it took me a while to kind of figure myself out. Not in that way, but more in the way of like, was it just a sexual phase, or was it actually something more?
And you had quite a different experience. Like
Totally
you said, you were
different.
in a relationship, so that adds a whole other realm to it, you know.
Yeah.
I knew in myself with my situation, I
Yeah.
had to make that decision and step away from that before I did that.
Yeah.
Just where I was at mentally and things
Yeah.
like that. So very different situations. But it's funny you sort of said that the common questions that get asked and whatnot. There's a lot of funny questions that get asked.
Yeah.
A lot of people have some very interesting responses. You actually had quite a funny one from someone that's a little bit older.
I did. So when we first started dating, I was asked, so you two are together, but you don't have sex, right? How do you have sex? And this was from an older person, and God bless her, love her to bits. But it was an interesting conversation about lesbian sex and the things that we may need to help with that. And I had to have this whole conversation over about 20 minutes explaining because they just genuinely thought that lesbians just don't have sex. And
It's just not an option.
It's just not an option. And I love that. And that's probably because they'd only been with maybe one person in their whole life, who knows, but it was an interesting one for me.
Yeah, gosh, there's some funny ones out there.
There is.
I think my favourite is when you're talking to straight girls, or so they think, or bi-curious girls or whatever that maybe didn't know that they were. Everyone that meets me now, when I tell them my story, how I was with a man for 9 years, they think, what?
Yeah.
In the queer community particularly, they're like, in what world do you come across as straight in any way? And not how I dress, but my energy and whatnot, and I guess confidence in dating women and things like that. And so I'd met some girls that knew me how I am now, the real me and whatnot. And when they heard my story, they all thought, well, hang on a second. How is that possible? How did you go through that? What were your... And I had a bombardment of questions. Like I had so many questions coming at me this day that they found out this. It turned out one of them was a little bit more interested in those questions than the others. But the questions are always like, well, how could you go down on a girl? I could probably kiss a girl, or I could have them do that to me, but I could never go down on a girl. Or I could never do this or whatever. And it's just these funny thoughts.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, they didn't have any trouble going down later on in the storyline, but they're the common responses, and they're almost so uneducated and unaware that they don't even realise what they're saying.
Yeah.
Is quite insensitive at times.
Oh, totally. A lot of the questions that are thrown at us, both you and I and other queer people, are just like without thought.
Honestly.
They will just say anything. And I think I talked about this in the first episode as well. They just can't comprehend it.
No.
Literally can't comprehend how you could do that. And it's just really funny.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the questions just never cease to entertain me. So I think that's just one thing that I would put out to everyone, is just kind of be a bit aware of your wording and things like that. If someone's opening up to you and telling you their story, even the funny ones of like, well, how would you go down on a girl or whatnot? Hearing that, I'm going, well, it's kind of you sitting there saying you'd be repulsed by going down on someone like me or something like that.
Yeah.
That you just have to be aware that the way you say things can be perceived differently, or carry a lot of weight that you're not aware of because you're not educated enough
100%
in these topics. So
yeah.
I think we're both pretty good. I'm very good at brushing things off and things like that. Sometimes too good, but I just think be aware.
Yeah, I think be aware. I also think that I'm probably better at it now, but when I was figuring things out, because I'm not actually attracted to, I wouldn't say a mask, because I am attracted to it to a certain level, but I love feminine energy. And when I was coming out and trying to figure that out, there were things like that thrown at me. You know, it's sort of typical that maybe someone who presents like me would be with a, you know, full-on mask, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's actually not what I'm attracted to. You know, there were questions that would come at me in that way that were insensitive. And when you're trying to figure things out, I was quite sensitive to that stuff because I couldn't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, I've actually had quite interesting comments made about that same group of girls when they were, just divulging all of these questions. We'd had a couple of drinks, we'd had a night out, they were all easily excitable and whatnot. And it wasn't a big deal, but one of them said something like, oh, well, I could probably be with someone like you because you present more like a man. And I was like,
Oh.
and that didn't sit well with me. It wasn't the time and the place to unpack it, nor was I confident enough to unpack it at that time. But you just have to be really careful.
So careful.
I don't identify as masc. So it's quite interesting when people throw me into that category. And we have another episode coming up where we're going to go into that at a much greater depth. But it does come into these questions related to sex and whatnot. And when that person said something, I was sort of taken back by that.
Yeah, I don't like that.
So I was like, well, that's actually not how I identify at all, nor would I want to have sex with you. So
obviously there's a space for masc, like here for it, if that's how you identify, if that's who you are.
No, absolutely.
I think for me it was almost expected that that's the way I would go, and I'd say that I love feminine energy. I love that for me, and it was something that I struggled with.
There's a huge, group of people that are femmes that are attracted to just femmes and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, I think people don't realise that everyone's a lot more open and fluid than they realise. Not everyone. Some people have how they identify and how they present, and they are happy with that, and they don't want to go elsewhere. At the end of the day, everyone is their own individual.
Absolutely.
I just think it's important to not assume things and things like that.
100%.
But yeah, absolutely. I think that's an interesting sort of thing that we can put to people and sort of get some feedback and break down the track on a later episode. So that kind of wraps up the whole funny question. The things that stump us when we sort of talk about our sexuality with people. Another huge topic that people bring up is, well, of course you'd have to use a strap. Or
all the time.
Well, what do you use? Because you obviously need to use something. Toys are a huge topic that people assume about or ask about. So I think it's something that we wanted to sort of break down. Do you think in a woman-loving woman relationship that toys are essential?
I don't believe that they're essential. I believe they can be your best friend, but I don't believe that they're essential. And I'll go even a bit more personal. I'd say some of our best times have not included any toys. And we were talking about this the other day. Look, there's a time and a place for toys. I think toys are also a very personal thing. And I'm very toy friendly. I've seen some people, even recently on TikTok, be like, ew, I don't use toys, or ew, I don't. And I'm not here for that. I have a lot of respect for the topic of sex and being fluid with sex, and everyone has their own individual needs. And some people may need toys, and that's what they need to get where they need to go, and that's the best pleasure that they have. Other people don't. But I think in a same-sex relationship, you absolutely don't need toys. And that doesn't mean that you're just wound down into one action. Absolutely not. I can assure you of that. That some of our best times are lots of things going on and not a single toy in sight.
Absolutely. I think you touched on a lot of things that I want to also touch on. And I just said touch, and now I'm thinking about all these other things with this topic of conversation. But you said that some people need them. And I think that that's a really important topic to talk about. You obviously know why I'm saying that.
Yeah.
I'm on a certain medication of which it pulls down the sensations in that area and the ability to have an orgasm.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot harder. And we were watching a TikTok one day, live, and people were talking and whatnot. And there was a few girls that sat back and were sort of like, well, if someone needs a toy to finish you, then they're just not good enough at what they do or whatever. And oh my goodness. I think I wrote a comment or something, but I didn't get too involved. But
no, yeah.
I physically, there's definitely been the odd occasion where I haven't used one, but it's not been an easy task. 99% of the time I need a toy or I will not finish. And that is just the way my body works with the situation it's in. Yeah. And it's something that I'm self-conscious about when I go into new experiences and new relationships. And it's because of people like that with those assumptions and those judgments and those opinions. They're just so
Well, they're damaging.
they're insensitive.
They are, because if that was somebody that you were potentially interested in pursuing and they made that type of comment, then imagine how difficult that would be later. You would be thinking about that. And for you, it's definitely a mental thing as well. Like you have to be quite relaxed, you know,
Absolutely.
nothing else going on. And that's where you have your best time, is when you're completely comfortable with what we're doing. And so imagine thinking in your head that other person would just be making it a competition to get you there.
Exactly.
That would be so stressful. And I think gay, straight, queer, whatever, we've all been there where our partner wants to make it a competition to get it to where it needs to go, to get that orgasm happening. And it is the worst thing for me anyway.
Honestly.
It is the worst thing when someone just wants to get things done.
The intensity in your face and everything just then. But that's what it's like.
But
I've
it's
had
true.
ex-partners like that, and
It's
it is.
true. It's so stressful.
And imagine it's being in that position where it is
Yes.
you're physically unable to. And also, it's not a simple solution of, oh, you use a vibrator or a toy or whatever and
No.
everything's sorted, because there's plenty of times that I just can't.
No.
I just literally can't. Doesn't
You
matter.
can't.
And it can feel amazing, and I can feel like I am almost there so much. And it is not about, it just needs
Yeah.
to go for longer. It just needs to be done better, whatever. Like, I can literally do it myself, holding it on the exact spot it needs to be on and this and that, and it will not work. So please, for the love of God, which is probably a really bad analogy to use in this moment,
Yeah.
listen to your partner and communicate and be open that
100%.
bodies are not all the same.
Yeah.
And not finishing someone or someone not being able to finish does not reflect someone's performance.
No.
It can. There's definitely people that are really bad in bed, but a lot of the time it won't have anything to do with that.
No. And just going back on, you were saying that you get nervous coming into a new relationship. You actually apologized to me.
I think I've actually cried after sex
You
once
actually
with us.
have. You actually have.
I've done that a couple of times in past situations as well, in past relationships.
Well, you were just so frustrated and nervous because this was early. Now, I don't think that would happen. There would be space for you to have those feelings, but I don't think you would be as in your head about it now.
No, and you also are very good at picking up on if I'm in one of those moments. It's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And so we might try something else, and then we'll just go, okay, well, let's just stop for a minute. But at the start, you were really nervous about it. And I think that's because you were having this expectation in your head about, how it was going to go. And it was very frustrating for you. And I felt for you in that moment because I knew it wasn't me. But I think you...
I was confident.
Well,
it wasn't.
It wasn't.
And you knew that.
And we talked about it. We had talked about it even before we met, that it was something that you were worried about or whatever. And you actually apologized to me. And I said, don't ever apologize to me for that. We can sit here for all day if you need to. I want to figure it out with you as your partner. I want to figure it out. That's going to take time. That's not going to happen today. It's going to happen over time. And it has.
And just clarifying, she doesn't mean sit there doing anything for hours and for days, because that would be torture. She more meant, breaking it down, figuring out what it was. This has been the most amazing experience for me sexually, having someone that's so understanding and respectful and open to listening to me, because I think there's a lot of people that sort of say they understand or whatnot. And I've had multiple sexual partners that are totally fine with it and really, really good about it all in the past. But it's something that I disclose very early on because I don't want that pressure, because there's been at least 2 or 3 times, once including you, that in a sexual experience, I have broken down because I feel so horrible that person would be feeling like they're not doing a good job when it's literally nothing about what they're doing.
No.
It's just not always as simple as people seem to think.
It's not. It's not just insensitive, but it's a little bit uneducated.
Absolutely.
And I'm not calling that person out by any means. I think TikTok is a great place to have that level of confidence. We were just talking about that in another episode, where you're behind a screen, you can say what you want. I don't think someone would say that to your face, but how quickly you get somebody to orgasm or whether or not you use a toy does not define that moment at all.
Or your ability.
Or your ability. Totally. Like, it's not. And for me, I'm so here for it. How many times have I said vibrators are our best friends? If we need to use one, we'll use one. If we don't need to use one, we won't. And also, you know, tying that back, does that mean that we need to use toys all the time? No, absolutely not.
We have a lot of fun with them.
Oh, yeah.
We definitely don't need them.
Don't need them.
I think it's very naive to think that queer relationships need toys.
I think for someone who's coming into a new queer relationship or is coming out of the closet or whatever, talk to a queer friend about it. Because I didn't know. I was naive when I first came out. I thought, okay, well, I've got to figure out what a strap-on is and how that works.
We should actually probably touch on that. I mean, I was about to say your first time using a strap-on. You haven't.
I've never used one.
That would have been a interesting topic to bring up for the first time.
But Mum, Dad, if you have listened up to this point, maybe stop here because I had never experienced a strap before you.
And I went through using a strap for the first time. Not with you.
It's okay.
I'd used it once or twice before that.
I'm pretty sure you used it a few more times than that. But yeah.
But it is very unique experience.
Yeah.
It is very uncomfortable. There is a lot of straps, quite frankly, to get tangled in. And when you are a novice or someone that is not experienced, it is very overwhelming. This is my personal advice. Take it or leave it. You can literally fuck it right off if you don't want it. But I would suggest you do it with someone that you've built some trust, some boundaries, some understanding. You're comfortable enough to speak up and comfortable enough to laugh at yourself because it's quite funny.
It is. And I mean, my experience though has been with you and you've been experienced. So
yeah.
But we have had moments where something's gone wrong, something's fallen off, you know, and it's annoying or whatever.
Don't we all hate those moments?
I know.
I do think that that's something that needs to be talked about a little bit more freely in the queer space when people are going through that for the first time. It's extremely daunting. I think if you're honest about it being your first time and whatnot, no one's going to sit there and expect you to be a pro, know what you're doing. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's not as simple as people probably make it out to be.
Totally. I couldn't even imagine me doing, like, I can't comprehend how you do it. It's very fun, but I can't comprehend how you do it. I also don't want to do it.
And that's the thing, is it's a very individual thing. You have a preference. And that's where this whole top-bottom switch kind of stereotype, category thing comes into the queer women relationships and community. Do you think that that's legit? Do you reckon that top-bottom switch is real? What are your thoughts on it?
Honestly, I think that if you have genuine open communication with your partner and it's fluid, to put a label of top-bottom switch, I feel it shouldn't even be a thing. I would say in our relationship we have a clear person that's a top, person that's a bottom, but at the same time, I think you would agree, that can switch up in certain dynamics. And I think when you're TikTok for me is very much like I'm a top. And if you even suggest that a top is a bottom, oh my God, the tea, you will be cancelled.
There will be an entire live with 9 boxes of people saying, can you believe that Sarah said this?
They will also be fighting about who's on top of who because the other one's underneath the other one in the box.
Exactly. No, I need to get out and come back into the live so that I'm on top of someone else.
But that might come back to in the same-sex relationships, that sort of who's more dominant and there is probably more of that than I believe in a, you know, straight cis sort of relationship. I think there's a bit more of like fighting for the top. But I think that if you were to define in our relationship, you know, in the way that we have sex, this is a top moment, this is a bottom moment. I don't know. I just don't know if there needs to be a label like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there needs to be a label. I think there are people that do use them, and I probably do use them a little bit as well. And I'm here for the label system type thing, but Do I believe everyone needs to come under a label? Absolutely not. Like if I said to someone, "Oh, you top, bottom, switch, whatever," and they said, "I'm not sure," or "I don't really identify as any of them," or whatever, absolutely go off,
Yeah.
queen. Like I have zero problems with that. I would classify myself as a top, maybe switch, but also there's people that have different understandings on that. Some people think a top is someone that only gives and will never receive.
So this is my issue with these. So maybe if we take it a step back, my issue is with the top bottom switch, people have, you have to meet this category to be a top, you have to meet this category to be a bottom. I don't think it's that simple.
Absolutely not.
And that's my problem with it.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is I think as a lot of these topics are in the queer community, they're so fluid based on the individual.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm a top and I say that I receive, but I still have top energy when I'm receiving.
You're definitely a top. just to be clear, Clem is a top.
And I don't have any issues if you were to say that I'm a switch. Like
No,
I have no thing
so-
where I'm like, oh my God, you have to say I'm a top.
No. You are a top. But what I don't like about these top bottom switches is that if we were to explain in detail where I think it would be a switch moment, someone would say that then you're not a top, you're a switch. And that's the issue that I have, is that you can be a top or you could be a bottom, but you can also fuck it up and do something different and be fluid in what you're doing with your partner or whoever you're with. It doesn't mean that if you're a top, you don't receive and you only give. And that I think that's bullshit.
Yeah. And for us, that's not how we view it. You know, we kind of see it as there is a top and a bottom if we don't even really talk about it, but if we did, that there is a top and bottom. However, we both have just as much fun as the other person.
100%.
Give and receive just as much as each other. There's just a different energy, I think. And I think that more comes down to like a dominance thing, which again doesn't mean that we don't fuck it up sometimes and switch the dominance around. I think a lot of people are a lot more open to it than just the three titles. And I think you don't want to get caught up in that when you're starting out in this world, because it is pretty much its own world. I don't think you want to get caught up in all of that sort of stuff. I think you want to try and just be open and try and suss it out. Like I said, my first experience was someone that I wouldn't be with now, that's not my type now and whatnot, but I was open to the whole situation, and it was a really positive thing for me to try and figure out where I am, where I sit, who I want to be with, and things like that. So I just think fluidity and being open is always the way to go, and just not pigeonhole people.
Totally. And that, I guess that's the point that I was trying to make, is it can be, I think, overwhelming when there's defined top, bottom, switch, even like lesbian labels we've talked about, which we won't talk about today, but like the black cat lesbian and Labrador or whatever, golden retriever,
There's
I don't know.
so many.
There's so many. Don't get caught up in all that.
No.
I think just take a step back and just figure out what you're comfortable with, what you enjoy. And when you're with your partner, don't worry about who's top or bottom. You'll figure it out, trust me. You'll figure it out pretty quickly who is the more dominant one, who's not. Or you both might be more dominant or you both might not be. But you'll figure that out, and that doesn't mean that you need to figure out what label that falls under.
Exactly, and I think another thing is it's going to be completely different with different people.
Totally.
Some people know what they are and they want to be this way and they will only be a top or whatever, or a pillow princess or whatever these titles are, which again we'll go into in another episode. But just be aware that every single relationship could be a completely different dynamic, and that is okay.
It is totally okay. And I think even falling back on what you said earlier, communication's key.
Always.
If you can communicate well with the person that, even if you sleep with someone one night stand, like unless you're completely intoxicated and you're just both like having a great time, but if you have you wouldn't know much about that at all.
I've never experienced that.
Yeah. Never, not once. Wow. Okay. I've got a few stories I could tell for you on your experiences, but we'll move on from that. But if you're able to have a conversation with somebody and understand what they like, even just the basics of what they like, what they don't like, and you listen to them, but even listen to their bodies when you're with them, that is huge.
Absolutely.
Listen to their bodies, feel what they're feeling, try and actually stay in tune with how they're moving, what they like, And just don't be selfish. If you can do that, then you're going to have a great time.
A great time.
Great time. We're kind of going to wrap up this episode with some advice. That's my biggest advice. Communication. Don't get caught up in the titles. If you're overwhelmed, especially a newbie coming out in this space, don't get too caught up in all of the extra labels and things, and just try and take some time to figure out what you like, what you don't like, what your partner likes, what they don't like, and go from there.
Just be open.
Be open.
It really does come down to that, I think, communication and being open.
Yeah.
Just take out the judgment, take out the pressure.
Yeah.
Would be my advice. We've mentioned a couple of labels in that last little segment about the golden retriever, the black cat, the pillow princess, top bottom switch, whatnot. All of these sort of cliche words that people throw around in the women love women space. We won't cover all of them. We're probably going to actually learn a lot of them from research as we go.
Yeah.
But that's what you've got to look forward to. I think queer language is its own thing, to be honest.
It blows my mind. Someone said to me, "You're a black cat, lesbian, and something else." I'm Sarah. I don't understand. And there's also a place for it, and I'm here for it, because some people will really resonate themselves to those labels. But I was so confused.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually here for that conversation, because I think we're going to have to do a bit of research.
Well, I think we're going to be learning just as much as
everyone else. We're going to be learning
else.
with you.
But yeah, I think it's going to be a great episode for people that are trying to learn their way in this community, but also people that are trying to support as an ally and things like that, and understand a little bit more. So that's what to look forward to. And also we want to hear what our listeners' first time was like in a same-sex relationship or sexual experience, I guess. How you felt, if there was a positive or a negative experience, anything you would change maybe. Just give us a little bit of tea.
We won't be saying names, so feel free to share the dates if you're happy for us to talk about it. But yeah, we're keen to hear. And also, sorry, I've got a question for the audience. I almost forgot. Do you want to read out the question?
The question is, does same-sex intimacy scare you? And if so, why?
That was the bees and the bees.
That was the bees and the bees.
Thank you so much for watching the episode. I hope you guys liked it. We got a little bit personal, here for it, and we look forward to having you on the next round.
Love you, bye.
Love you, bye.